I tried to do a Facebook Live earlier and it did not work. And I don't know why it didn't work, but it didn't work. And it wasn't because the cat sat on the keyboard. The microphone didn't connect properly and the video didn't connect. So it wound up as like 52 seconds of dead air. But I wanted to use one of my many scripts and ideas that I've written out in my Obsidian folder for YouTube videos that I could make. And I'm going to try reading you a script and see how that works. Usually I do everything extemporaneously, but I did bother to write a script out for this. And this one is about why I use social media. A couple of weeks ago at a party, somebody asked me, why do you spend all this time doing social media anyway? Are you trying to get famous or something? And it's interesting. I will go back and forth, I guess, between the script and extemporaneous. My sister also said, I thought you wanted to be famous. And it's not that. It's that I want to make a contribution. I have accumulated an enormous store of knowledge and perception and experiences, and I want to put them back out into the world in a way that they can be useful for other people. Hi, I'm Shona Lee, and I'm 18 years into a social media habit, as long as we include LiveJournal. I have yet to go viral. I went little tiny semi-viral a couple of times and had like 1,500 people read a single blog post in the mid-2000s. That was kind of significant, but I have yet to make a dime doing it. But I do have a public record of how my thinking and my life have evolved over the last 2 decades, so that's a pretty decent outcome. When I first started having a public blog, I had a couple of goals. I started out with LiveJournal, and I went from a private LiveJournal that was only for friends, and I shifted over to WordPress. I was homesteading, and it was the era of the mommy blogger, and when people were showing you how they grew their vegetables and what they did around the house. So I thought that maybe sharing recipes and my life around the house might be useful, and it might make a few dollars, but it didn't. But it was a lot of fun. I didn't make a business out of it, but I made a decent network of friends. And at that time, I was living rurally, and it kept me sort of sane during the isolated years of being home with the kids. And I was working in this like little tiny library. I'll maybe put the blog post about how small the library was. There's a couple of blog posts about that time still on my website. The second goal I had when I started blogging in public and using social media was to build a wall behind myself so I couldn't just go back to the corporate world I had left behind. I really was committed to living a sustainable life and moving into the transition before it was really committed to by other people. And I wanted to go there, and so I did. And I wanted to leave a trail of my authentic self behind me so that nobody could ever claim I had hidden something from them. I had cared about sustainability so much that I left my career to find out what it would take to build a life of sustenance. So I was doing that back to the land, raising chickens, growing vegetables. And I didn't want to leave the option open to return to something where I had to pretend that I didn't care about all of those things, that I couldn't go back to working in an engineering space where I was expected to be, I worked in power systems, on electrical dams at one point, and I worked in the nuclear industry at one point, and I didn't want to leave the door open to be able to go back to those things. So I think the question at the party, what he was really feeling out, the real question was, do you want to be an influencer? And so to this, I had to kind of go, well, I don't want to be famous, and I don't want to be an influencer like to get you to buy things or to stock my fridge in a particular way. But also, yes, I want to influence you. I want you to think differently about the world and your place into it, but I don't want to do the mimosa on a yacht in the Mediterranean thing. Although I would drink a mimosa, I would also go on a sailboat. And I have photographic evidence of that. But when I'm talking about a life you don't want to get away from, when I wrote that blog post in 2011 or so, I wasn't talking about a life of perpetual vacation. I was talking about building a life in which my human needs are met by the rhythms of daily living, that I've got my needs for connection and meaning and deep, genuine nourishment and purpose, as well as relaxation and joy in the one life, that I'm not trying to get all of those things in my spare time that's left over after I've earned enough money to buy back those hours of my life. I want an integrated life, not a dissolute one. I don't want hedonism. I want nourishment. So we need to go back, in fact. As I said it earlier, I started out with LiveJournal, and my very first username on LiveJournal was Ethical Life. But I think I lasted about a week and a half with that as my username. And then I decided it was too great a pressure to bear, and I changed it. But I did, in that initial choice, it betrayed my real goal, was that I wanted to do something like Colin Bevan did much more successfully when he did the No Impact Man project. And I wanted to figure out how I could live in best alignment with my moral compass. Now you will see, if you've seen my intro video, it is titled, How Do We Live in Alignment? I want to live in alignment with my moral compass. I do not want to feel like I'm compromised all the time by the choices on offer. I needed to understand the choices that were on offer much more clearly and then figure out how to make better choices. So I could have just gone off and done that on my own. I have boxes of handwritten notes. Actually, they're back here. These two boxes up here, I don't know if we can we see them? Yeah, these two boxes up here both contain stacks of notes from my years gone by. And there's also a set of journals that are like this wide over the last 20 years. So I've written thousands and thousands of pages of notes. And that record certainly could have sufficed for the purpose of self-exploration. But I think that all of us who are intellectuals at heart have more than one drive. We want to gather as clear an understanding of the world as we can, and we want to share what we've learned. I guess the intellectuals who don't have an interest in sharing what they've learned, I don't meet any of them because they're not talking about it. So it occurs to me that I may have a confirmation bias there, but let's assume that that's not an unusual combination. The goals of those two things can be really self-conflicted because it's hard to tease apart the aspiration of imposing your understanding on the world, that sort of egoic desire for the world to be as you wish it would be, and bringing that understanding into the great conversation. And you can capitalize the G and the C in that. But in my experience, knowledge rarely sits in a mind as content to just rest there. And it's really funny. I've got a little highlighted thing in my Obsidian script that says, this is contestable, but it doesn't link anywhere. And I don't know exactly what I was doing with that. So let us assume that a future video will explore the idea of whether knowledge wants to participate in the great conversation or whether it is content to sit in a mind and rest there. I don't know, clearly, since I bothered to write that down. I also had a moment of great disillusionment with my work in academia, and this is funny, actually. I had a pivotal moment in my intellectual thinking when I went to see the movie Super Size Me, because I came out of that movie saying he has had more impact with this than I ever will with my academic writing. Very few papers ever get more than 10 citations, and there are books on every single university library shelf that have been purchased and never checked out. I did one of my little blogs was called Languishing Volumes. And it was one where I went into libraries and I would pull a book off the shelf. And if it hadn't been checked out in some number of years, I don't remember what the criteria was, I would read it and do. So it was only the neglected books. And I found some interesting stuff. And it was novels that I did at that point. But in in the academic world, if you walk into those huge libraries, and I've talked about my library of awe is in one of my previous videos, there's all kinds of books there that are just sitting there, and the ideas have been poured into this physical form, and then they're no longer really participating in the conversation. They have to flow. Ideas make new ideas when they go from one mind to another, not from one book, not from a mind to a book. They have to go back from the book back into another mind before they can make new ideas. So I had a vision. I have a vision. I have a vision. I had a vision when I was just looking at what I didn't read this whole paragraph through before I started talking about it. When I was in my academic work, I had a vision of reforming the way that we think about knowledge and social responsibility. I was working in how engineers think of and conceive of their responsibility as the creators of our built environments. So I was actually thinking of not, people think technology, now they think computers, but I was thinking technology as in the things that we have built collectively, including our systems, including the built environment. But I found when I started really looking at public intellectuals and comparing it to working in that strict academic environment, I was largely just polishing some very specific knowledge in some very specific branch in the knowledge tree. So I had this little pretty bit that I understood very, very well. And as much fun as it was to play with ideas and talk to professors about their work, because I was also doing I was doing a lot of instructional design, and I was helping faculty members develop aligned assessment techniques and really think about how their teaching practice reflected what they believed about knowledge, about how thoughts go from one mind to another, about the structure of their discipline, about where their discipline fit in the broader structure of knowledge. So it was a cool job, and it was a lot of fun. But I really was doing that broad sense making, and here's another one. It didn't, and it doesn't fit well into any of the existing disciplinary boxes, because the work that I do, really, I think about thinking, I think about evidence, I think about how structures live in human minds and bodies. And then, if that's how structures live in human minds and bodies, how do we find the points at which we can individually make changes to those structures, bringing our bodies and minds together in conversation in complex systems? So if I was going to bother with all this thinking and all this sense making in the world, and I was working in a tiny library, was only seeing like 15 people per week in the library. It was a really, really small library. It was only open for like 15 hours a week or something. Like, I had the little tiny Marion the Librarian thing from The Music Man. That was like my life for a brief period of time there. Not even brief. And I was growing vegetables, and I was teaching some cooking at the farmer's market. I was teaching people how to use spices. I make spice blends. I make cookies. I was like Earth Mother / philosopher, but not having enough of an impact. The Earth Mother thing, I actually really love those earthy things. I love food and cooking and my cats and my kids and my house. I love all of the physical world. I love hiking. Hiking's one of my very favorite things. I plan all of my vacations around walking and food because I really value walking and food. But if I was gonna do all this sense making in my sort of weird, isolated rural life that I don't live any longer, I've moved back to an urban center, I wanted to put the sense I was making out into the world. And that meant making it easy to find and ideally easy to understand at least some of the time. And so that's why I've gone from one social media platform to another. I've heavily invested in all of them: Twitter, Facebook, LiveJournal. When people really started being disenchanted with Twitter and Facebook over the last couple of years, and I started trying to put more of my work back into a professional setting, and networking with people in the sustainability regenerative, sorry, I was thinking about reformation and reclaiming things, but in the regenerative community, the regenerative finance space, all of those spaces where people are really talking about systemic and structural change and how do we build the communities and networks of human beings and knowledge to create the change, to make this. I saw the beautiful word yesterday. It was throughtopias. So the throughtopias are the paths through the coming changes, which have good outcomes at the end. And I want to hang out with the people who are working on not just writing those throughtopias, but building those throughtopias. And so I had to go, in this case, I wound up on LinkedIn because the people talking about academic work and the intersection of academic and practical work, weirdly, there's a huge fraction of them on LinkedIn, and there's an enormous amount of that networking that's being done in that professional space where we were, there's the very boring LinkedIn posts, but there's a whole lot of really interesting, cool people on LinkedIn as well. And so I've found that you can genuinely network and make connections. And I've met wonderful, wonderful people through social media, and then had phone calls and Zoom calls, and sometimes had coffee with them in person. And it's just been how I've maintained a relationship with the outside world when I've been doing all this writing, sitting on my couch, sitting in my living room. You've seen my kitchen. You've seen this is the end of my couch. I have to show you this. This is a print I had that came from Wondermark, and I will put the link to the print in the video, in the notes. That is so me. That is so me. So, I've been this academic without portfolio, wandering the world at large for about 20 years, and the social media has kept me from going mad. So, that's my answer. Here I am, 18 years later, still thinking big thoughts in public. I'm holding up some of my older work for examination, and, I just joined Blue Sky, and I'm like, I have hundreds of blog posts that I can share on Blue Sky. I don't have to keep writing new stuff. Ha! Although I still am making videos because my thinking continues to evolve and I'm meeting more people. So some of it I'm holding up and I'm still nodding. I read some of my old posts and I'm like, oh yeah, that's really, really good. And sometimes I'm tipping my head to one side and squinting to see whether they stand the test of time. But the social media piece is deeply, for me, it's social. And I would love for it to become my work in some way. I would love for all this networking to turn into getting to do this writing and thinking somewhere other than at my kitchen table. But in the meantime, at least I am still doing the thinking and writing, and the social media gives me a place to put it where otherwise it would just be on scraps of paper all over my house. It's also on scraps of paper all over my house and in an Obsidian file. Um, but this way, maybe it's good for something for somebody other than me. So that's why I'm on here. I want you to know the things that I think. And then the things that I think and the things that you think can merge together. And then we can think new things. So that's me. That's why I'm on social. That's a scripted version of my video. And it's 21 minutes long. I don't know if I'm going to be able to post that.